Hey, what's up, everyone? We've got a very special episode planned for you this week. We're joined by Mike Downie, director of No Dress Rehearsal, and of course, brother to the late, great Gord Downie. We hope you enjoy the episode. Stay tuned. All right, welcome to Legacies, everyone. As I mentioned, we got a very special episode planned for you this week. We're joined by Mike Downie, award-winning documentary filmmaker, and of course, director of No Dress Rehearsal. Mike, good morning. Thank you for joining Legacies.
My pleasure, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Man, I don't even know where to start. The lead up to this, listen, brother, huge hip fan. Obviously, I've seen some of the other things that you've done as well, but the drop of No Dress Rehearsal, holy shit. Like 4 years in the making, but I don't even know where to start. Usually I have this very planned out and I'm like, where do we start with this? But so I want to understand the inspiration behind this because we know it was 4 years in the making. Let's start with that first, because I think that will set the groundwork for where we're going.
Uh,
What was the inspiration?
the inspiration really, I guess, came from when Jake Gold rejoined the band as their manager. He was the guy who kind of got them started in 1986 and was the manager for 17 years. He gets fired in episode 3. And then he comes back in 2020 after 17 years and kind of gets, I think the band the guys were, I think, really paralyzed. I know they were just in terms of their career and everything after Gordy's death. And Jake came back, Bernie and Patrick Sandbrook, the former managers, stepped down. I think recognizing that the band was just sort of frozen in this sort of stasis. And Jake came back on board and I had a conversation with him shortly thereafter. I mean, I knew he was coming back and I talked to him and we had a conversation and I said, I really think it's time to start, because I knew it would take a long time as well. But I said, I think it's time to start thinking about doing the definitive documentary, like telling the whole story, the whole, whatever we want to call it, 35 years, or now it's 40 years, 40-year anniversary from when the band started. So yeah, it was just kind of, I think them coming out of this, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah,
it
seemed
just
like
a frozen time for them is the only way I can really just sort of describe it.
And for those that haven't seen it yet, I mean, you got to be living under a rock. If you're Canadian, and you haven't seen this yet, I encourage you to do so. But listen, you could see that, and you managed to capture the emotion so well in this. And I think it was around that episode 3 where you really started to see, like, I couldn't imagine, right? So, this band of brothers. It's really a love story. I mean, it's such an emotional connection, but you could see it get to that point where, Rob is talking about certain things in his point in life after Gord's death. And you could tell they were at this low, and you managed to capture that emotion so well. So, I mean, it does make sense. And we're glad, obviously, to see Jake come back in and light the fire. But 4 years. So was it, I mean, because we're coming up on that 40th anniversary mark, or is it past, but right in that timing
This year.
Did you look at it and go, okay, this is going to take me 4 years? Like, because you've done other films. Did you look at this and go, wow, there's going to be a lot of archival footage to go through? 4 years. Yeah, that's going to take 4 years.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing is in 2020, when we started, it's COVID. We're not really starting in earnest, but we're starting to think about it. I'm starting to, plot out the episodes. I am starting to try to track down some of the footage that I knew about. I had some myself, get that in to be digitized. Some of it had never been digitized. So yeah, it really started in earnest, Tom, in 2021 when we started to shop it around, and that's what took us to Prime Video. And they did not need much time with it. I have to say, they were very quick. They wanted to do it, which was amazing. It was like, okay, because really any project, this one obviously is pretty special, but you need that dance partner. And you need a dance partner who's really willing and who can provide the budget that's going to be required to handle all that archive, the transfers, the archive is an amazing thing, and you the strength of a project like this is only as it can only be as strong as the archive is, really, because you
Mhm.
really want to have that time travel. You don't want to just tell these stories. You want to take the viewer into those rooms and those experiences onto the bus or into the back of that little van.
Yeah.
So, um, yeah, that was really huge. And such a big part of this project was chasing down the archive and then creating really a database that was searchable and that we could,
Mm.
because so much of it, you just so hard to control. It's like you're
I
either
could
surfing on
imagine.
that wave or you're getting crushed by it. There's really nothing
Yeah.
in between. So I
Man, I
think we
could
did a
just
pretty good
imagine.
job of surfing
I
it. So
yeah, well, I mean, there's so much. 4 hours. Ho Is there any way of capturing how much archival footage and interviews, and how much was there?
well, put it this way, with the archive, starting with another roadside attraction, 1993, which I filmed for Hex and Kettle, first
Mhm.
documentary I ever made, which is
Yeah.
really not very good, but it exists and it's out there. Uh, and baby steps. But we had 70 hours from that. That's that's
Wow.
that's the one that
Wow.
I had in house, and
Yeah.
then the amazing footage that we got from Revolver Films. They had done a hip CBC special called Full Fledged
Mhm.
Vanity.
Yep.
That you the band purchased all the outtakes of that. That was all shot on 60 millimeter film.
Oh, wow.
That is 50 hours. I
Jeez.
mean, they filmed it over a year on and off
Yeah.
with the band. That's where you see them in the van traveling to the States and then
Yep.
going to Europe,
Okay.
in the different, clubs and in a recording, studio,
Mhm.
and then back at Fort Henry in Kingston. So now we're over 100 hours, and those are 2
Yeah.
sources. So
That's
it's
yeah, and that's just
hundreds
2.
of hours.
Man.
Ah,
So, I
tons.
mean, you talk about the dance partner. It's every filmmaker's dream to be able to get with a Prime or man, well, there's so many now, different streaming. Was it for them, was it a no-brainer? It must have been a no-brainer.
It was. They responded really quickly, which is really, means everything because, um you're dealing with arguably the largest company in the world, basically,
Yeah.
Amazon is. I mean, and, they're just really, um, Tyler Byrne and Sean Alpern in LA, like, they were just so upfront, like, "We
Mm,
really wanna do this. We want you to make it. You're the right person to make it. Put
nice.
your team together and go for it."
Yeah.
And that support went all the way through. Um, and, yeah, like, it really was and now, with the rollout at TIP and, Calgary and, at the film festivals at Halifax and Vancouver, and we're in Kingston this week,
Mhm.
they've supported all that as well. So
Yeah.
it's been pretty amazing. It's been
Did
pretty
it did
amazing,
it
I have to say.
feel yeah, I could just imagine, and Tiff, I mean, great success, obviously, we knew that that was going to happen,
Yeah,
but the timing worked out well,
yeah.
so that was good, but did Prime ever separate it? Because, they're a business at the end of the day, and obviously businesses need to make money in order to survive, but for them, did they look at this more of, "That doesn't matter so much, we need to share the story needs to be told," or was it I'm just curious where that thought process would
No,
come
they
if
it
they're
was
even
really all about, like, what's best for the story.
yeah.
What is it that you need to tell the story, in the most authentic and powerful way, I guess you could say, or at least,
Mhm.
in a really authentic way. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, no, there was really none of that. And as a matter of fact, they even went out of their way to say, "Look, we're here in LA. We didn't really know that much about the band before we signed on to the project, like not the details and some of the stories. So you'll tell us when, if our notes coming back to you don't make sense or we're missing the point, then you tell us, and we'll be here because, they're insight was interesting because we do want to reach people that know nothing about the band. But this is not
Mhm.
meant to be an insider's guide to the Tragically
Right.
Hip. This is meant to
Yeah.
be for everybody. Like,
Yeah.
if you're a hardcore fan, we're going to give you what we're going to put, fresh meat in into the bowl.
Yeah.
We're going to give you the stories and footage that you've never seen before. But for the fan, that is could be an age, just didn't see the band, didn't know anything about the band. Maybe they're on the other side of the world. We want them to watch, give us 4 hours and take them from 0 to 100. So
Yeah.
that was, very, that input that we did get from LA was helpful. It's like,
Mhm.
we don't understand this part. You're like, oh, really?
Oh,
I'm like,
yeah.
oh, okay. Yeah. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe we're skipping a step here, or we're using a shorthand that, you know, doesn't do us any favors. So
Yeah. Well, that makes sense, and I obviously, so 40 years or damn near, they obviously touched and built a huge fan base and those that did love them. But then you start talking about different generations, like I've got younger children as well, and they'll hear I play the hip almost daily, so they'll hear one song here or there, and they've gotten into it. But is that the audience you're talking about? These audiences, for whatever reason, certain successes in the US, but obviously huge in Europe. But it was I don't know if that was out of the gate thinking we're going to capture the story of the hip and Gord, but we're also going to look at how can we bring their music and their story to others that didn't get a chance to experience them.
for sure. And, I think about it, when you do a legacy, project, that's what this is.
Yeah,
You really are thinking forever,
right.
like this needs to stand up, 20 years from now,
Mhm.
for somebody who's curious about any part of this story, who sits down and gives, gives it a chance. And so, yeah, no, we were definitely thinking that we want, like, and the other thing too, Tom, is that their story is such a powerful story. And I actually, as as well as I knew it, I mean, my gosh, I got to see it firsthand through Gord and through the other guys in the band. We all go back to the same high school. But it wasn't until I really started to plot it out. You do there's a couple different ways to do it, but I end up writing shooting scripts, like, for each episode way
Yeah,
before you start filming anything. And it really reads like a script. Like, it really
mhm,
is, where would we start? And
right.
this is subject, everything changes, of course, but at least you start out with this fully thought out plan.
Yeah,
And even when I was going through that in the earliest days, I was just like, wow, if I was to write this, this is what I would write, like, all
yeah,
five at the same high school. It's a small thing, but, having done other, films, it's very common. You get a situation like that, and it's like, okay, 4 out of 5 guys went to the same high school. So it's like, okay,
yeah. That's
let's
fucking
not worry about
crazy.
the fifth guy who didn't go. We'll just leave that out. So you
Yeah,
kind of do a little bit of, it's a little bit of smoke and mirrors, to kind of get
yeah,
your story to be kind of compact and not
yeah,
still there. There's a little example. And another one I like to remind myself is then, well, when it's time to get management, who do they get? They don't get some
mhm,
guy, some uncle in Kingston. They go to Toronto and they get Alan Gregg, a very incredible brain and a
yeah,
political player, like, just, on the national scene, working with the prime minister, and
yeah,
Jake Gold, who is like a
yeah,
super tough, classic rock and roll manager. And that's who they get. Like,
yeah,
and, as you're plotting it out, you're just like, "Oh, man, that is gonna be a good scene when that comes in," and
yeah,
of
yeah,
course,
and
when
it
they get
was it was so
signed,
good.
so good. Oh, Jake's, he's something else. So, and then they get signed, and of course, the guy from New York, big record company, MCA, flies
Yeah,
up, and Gord has a major, microphone malfunction,
yeah,
and turns it into a gag, which, or at least turns it into part of the
yeah,
performance. And
yeah,
everyone's kind of watching, like, mouths open, like, what's good? What's happening now? And so, I mean, in a way, would, does Bruce Dickinson sign the band without that little bit of
Mm.
stagecraft that Gord
Yeah.
comes up with? I don't know. You know, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but he still talks about that. He describes it like moment by moment as he's sitting there, like
Yeah.
watching what's happening. And I think if he was, it definitely convinced him in that moment.
Yeah, yeah,
So, again, we're talking about the story, like, there you go.
yeah.
And there are other story parts that aren't in there that were sort of compelling, but,
Mhm.
um, yeah, so, um,
But wasn't that the magic of Gord though? Like, just to like, arguably
was
for me anyways, one of the best frontman ever, and I don't even like to put that, frontman because especially with the hip, because the band was just a bunch of brothers that loved each other,
yeah.
and like any family relationship. I'm sure there was struggles, which you captured very well as well. But I could just imagine. I love that point when you introduced Jake and the points in the bar, and I'm like, oh my god, flashback to the '80s. Like, holy shit! Well, not just the look, but the atmosphere,
The
right?
chain
And
smoking.
yeah, the chain smoking, and this record producer executive flying up from New York to Canada of all places. Was that a challenge? I did have a question with that. Like, so when Jake and team were shopping the opportunity to sign and look for a record label, was it always a thought we need to get a US? Do you know this? Like, was we need to get a US record label in order to see the success, or did it just by chance happen that way?
No, I think that was the goal of all Canadian bands at the time,
Okay.
that had, something to offer, was to sign in the States. It just,
Okay.
it's your best shot at, becoming, a global band, or at least,
Hmm.
getting outside of our borders. So, um, yeah, I think that was their primary goal, was to, Jake could tell you, but, it was the idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
Were they turning down Canadian labels at the time? I don't think so. I mean,
Hmm.
as Alan Gregg says, there was no hue and cry to sign the
Okay.
band at
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
Although there was this sort of building, obviously building energy and excitement
Mhm.
surrounding the band. But, yeah, Bruce did an amazing, like, he really, without Bruce Dickinson from MCA Records, who I got to talk to and interview, several
Mhm.
times, they don't go to Memphis to make Up to
Right.
Here. They don't go to New Orleans to make Road Apples. They don't go to London to make Fully Completely with, Sangaritas. So,
Mm.
like, you can't underscore that. And, Bruce, uh, brought in Don Smith, the
Right.
producer for the first two records, because he knew that he wanted somebody who wasn't going to intimidate these guys. He knew they were a
Mm.
bunch of five guys, confident, but small town guys who'd
Yeah.
never been in this situation before. So he didn't want somebody who was just going to come in and railroad them like, I've got the resume and
Mhm.
it's, we're going to do it my way. He really, the band played live off the floor, as they say, in the studio. So,
Yeah.
which gave them a lot of, I'm sure it gave them a lot of comfort. So
Mhm.
all those things, Tom, really kind of, you can't really discount any of it, really,
Yeah.
like in terms
Yeah.
of the band's ultimate success,
Mhm.
because, I think, for, you can imagine what that was like, going to Memphis. I mean,
Yeah, it's mind-boggling, really.
oh my, like,
Like, a
amazing.
small town Canadian band picked up by a New York record label, all these execs, and then all of a sudden, "Hey, boys, we're going to Memphis. We're
Yeah,
gonna go to New Orleans."
yeah,
Like, I couldn't imagine.
yeah. No, and that's, you know, um, at that age and stage, to be, yeah, like, taken so seriously,
Yeah.
and I think it could do nothing but just add to the confidence, that the band was feeling, that they
Mhm.
had in each other,
Yeah.
but to have that, to be in the industry and to be getting, to have people really, like Bruce even described, he would call Don, because, he didn't wanna be the meddling record, exec. But he would call Don, and Don would play him stuff over the phone like that,
Oh,
like before the guys arrived, kind of thing.
yeah.
Just say, "Hey, how's it going?" And he would play him stuff over the phone just for Bruce to, hear how it was going.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, there were a lot of different people that, um, deserve credit,
Yeah.
for some of those early steps that the band took that really, you know, that really contributed to us talking about them today,
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
got them to that high, watermark.
Yeah. Mike, what was your relationship like with the band in those earlier days? Because I could just imagine, you've got rock star brother and a band, and they're doing their thing and they're jamming here and they're hitting all the bars. And I remember being with a very small band in early days. We play very small towns, right? And it was like, you know, will this ever go anywhere? But what was your relationship like with the band in those earlier days?
Well, just very much as Gord's brother.
Mm,
I got to hang out, tried not to abuse that. Like I knew from Gord, what the feeling was like in the dressing room before they went on. And I'm
mm.
talking about before they went on in the Manor in Kingston and Alfie's Pub at Queens.
Yeah,
And I knew it was stressful and things like that. So I definitely tried not to be that person, like,
right.
somebody's going to have to ask me to leave the room kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, but, and, I think I kind of have just sort of had a bit of the lay of the land.
Mhm.
Um, and, yeah, but it was just so exciting, just exciting to be a part, just to be there,
Yeah.
to be watching, to see your brother up there. Like, I never really completely, well, I accepted it, but I never really quite believed how good Gord was. Like,
Hmm.
I just was like, wow, Gord, like that, you're so good. Like, we're from a small town outside of Kingston. Kingston's not the small town to us. Kingston's the big town to
That's
us.
the big town. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because we moved from Amherstview and
Right.
only 10 miles away. But my gosh, like, just, it was like another world moving into
Right.
Kingston, into downtown Kingston and going to KCVI, the high school where everybody met. Like
Mhm.
that was it was just a magical, magical world in 1980. And, yeah, so I never completely, got used to it.
Yeah.
I'd be at the Air Canada Centre in Toronto or wherever, and they'd come out and I'd just be like, wow, this is amazing. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I
Yeah.
enjoyed it.
Well, and the reason I ask is you can tell you're obviously behind the camera a lot in this, and and I get it. That makes sense. You are obviously pivotal and part of their life. I mean, you're Gord's brother. And the
Mhm.
reason I ask that is you can tell that you're able, there's a bond there. Even though you're not hearing you, you're not seeing you, in certain cuts you do, but you can tell there's a special bond between all the band members and the individuals that influence their life and their success. So, and that's why I was curious, because that emotion, you were able to capture and draw that emotion out, um, honestly, like no other. And so that's why I was wondering, where was that bond? Where was that,
Oh,
that feeling with them? Because I don't think anyone else would have been able to do that, to be
I
honest, Mike.
I take your point for sure, Tom, yeah, no, I think having had just such a history with the guys in the band, I knew them all. Um, it wasn't the first project I did with them either. I
Yeah.
did mention Hex and Kettle. Oh, I did a few music videos off Phantom Power.
Yeah.
Gord and I directed those. So, yeah, there was a lot of trust there. There was a lot of trust. And
Mhm.
also I was very, I've been doing this for quite a while. And right from the very beginning, before the cameras rolled, I talked to each one of them and just said, we really need to go as deep as we can on this. We cannot, nobody wanted a pup piece.
Yeah.
That was understood from the very beginning.
Mhm.
And I think it was just understood that we were going to go as deep as possible. And I think there was the trust not to self-edit in the moment. That's a big
Mhm.
part of it. And I kind of do that with any project I work on. My job, I think, as the director, I can tell you, your job is really to make something happen in front of the camera.
Mm.
When people get, the look and everything else is important. A lot of that is the DP or the cinematographer is responsible for the look of it, obviously in
Yeah.
conjunction with the director. But the director, to my mind, the director is responsible for what happens in front of the camera.
Mm.
And
Okay.
so for something to happen, person that's being interviewed, the person that's being filmed has to somehow get really comfortable. And,
Right.
like, you're in a studio right now, like there's lights,
Mhm.
there's a performance aspect to it. There's people,
Yep.
behind the camera. There's all these things that are really distracting and really take you out of being in that moment where you're willing to kind of think, really new thoughts,
Yeah.
to avoid the
Yeah.
cliche and just to go to the pat answer. So
Mhm.
that's really your job, is to create that kind of trust, and it has to be real,
Right.
so how do you do that? Well, you share something of yourself, perhaps. Yeah, you really have to be a bit of a provocateur in a way, yeah, to ask difficult questions,
Mhm.
and not to back into things, to make
Yeah, yeah.
people understand, like, oh yeah, this is where we need to talk about difficult things, and we need to do it in a not a safe way. We need to do
Mhm.
it in an honest, open way,
Yeah.
and then we'll figure it out later.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out later. If so all those things, but having a relationship with everybody and then building on that, because I think I could see the difference between. I did a lot of interviews, like with the
Mhm.
band. We had 4 different sessions. 2 or 3 of them were all day, and I mean, like, 7 hours of camera
Jeez.
rolling.
Yeah.
And so, I think there was a difference I could tell from the first one, although in the first interviews we did, were at the school, and, KCBI, because we wanted to get in there, was being, the school had, Kingston built a new high school,
Okay.
super school, that this one was being sold.
Oh.
Queens bought it, so it was empty. We had
Mm.
it, back in, 2021. In October, we had it for, like, 3 or 4 days,
Okay.
and
I did
so
wonder about that because I saw there was times in there's scenes where there's, like, leaves blowing in, and I'm like, "Did they put that there? Is the school abandoned? What's going on?"
it was, and it was, empty. It was vacant,
Yeah.
besides all the stuff
Wild.
that was still hanging around, and that kinda created a bit of a it's an interesting place to start, because we did not have a deal at that point. We had conversations started, but we did not have a
Okay.
deal in place, but I just knew we have to get in there before this place starts to be, who knows what the schedule is for renovation or anything else. So it was very important.
Yeah.
So what I started off by saying was that, I could see the trust developing from episode one, or first interviews, to the next ones, which were months later, probably 8 months, 7 months later. Um, Having said that, those interviews at KCVI were pretty, we went pretty deep.
Yeah.
Gord Sinclair is talking about the death of his brother Colin, something he
Yeah.
never really opened up about, certainly not in an interview, maybe
Mhm.
privately, but even privately, it was something that Gord, really didn't, um, just not something that he really, would, talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and the trust, I think, developed from one interview to the next. They were all
Yeah,
spaced
yeah.
out by several
Well,
months,
I
I think.
wanted that's the reason I'm asking is, here comes the tough question now, right? Which is you gotta kinda pick. So going into it, did you have an idea of, "Okay, we've got these band members. I've got a relationship with them. This one's going to be the hardest one to really get open with and get what we need for the film versus, and where there's surprises where you're like, holy shit. Okay. This, you're talking about Gord and talking about, the passing of his brother, but at the same time, there are other moments there that you're like, wow, that's some trust. You can
Mhm.
tell.
Yeah. Um, well, as I think back, I didn't really go in with any kind of, like, here's how I'll set up for the tough questions.
Yeah,
Mostly, I think it's better just to be really upfront,
sure.
and maybe, you sat down and your coffee, is still hot, and
Yeah.
maybe you're not coming in blazing with something really delicate off the top, but at the same time, don't pussyfoot around, like, let
Mhm.
your intentions be known, and, say, um, let's talk about the biggest fight. I mean, one of the first interviews in the house, we filmed the first interviews at KCVI, and the second interviews and the third interviews and the fourth interviews we did in this beautiful old house in Kingston, kind of
Mm.
just standing in as the, old Kingston, if you will,
Yeah. Yeah.
and, beautiful, beautiful old home. And, um, I think with Robbie, one of the first questions I asked is, "Tell me about the biggest fight you ever had with my brother." So he was like, "Oh." There's a couple. There's
Yeah.
let's start with this one. And we're just like, okay.
Yeah.
But I knew what I was, I knew I knew a little bit about them. I didn't know that much actually, to be honest. But
Yeah.
again, I just think with these things, if you're respectful and um, you kind of have, yeah, you've done your homework, you
Yeah.
know what it is you're talking about.
Yeah.
I just think it's kind of better to just to be straight up, and just know that, um, we're all adults and we can have difficult conversations and, yeah. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
there's no question. There's a lot of trust there, and I
Yeah.
feel like I built on the trust over the filming,
Sure, sure.
period.
Yeah, and they'd be able to see it. So, with that then, what was the most rewarding? I love to do these worst and best. In this case, we're gonna shift it a little bit to what was the most rewarding part of making this documentary versus the most challenging part?
Well, couple of things. The most rewarding, I think, in the early, like in this, we did most of the interviews. Where we filmed some actuality, not a lot, but there is some. We used most of it, I think. But um, the early on in the interviews, because we had quite a full schedule for the summer of 2022, and like a lot. And I remember might have just been after the first week or so, and I kind of thought to myself, "Geez, I'm going to be really relieved." Happy when I'm on the other side of all these interviews, like looking ahead to the fall, to the late
Yeah.
fall. And I kind of caught myself and I thought, if you are going to spend the summer talking to myself here, if you're going to spend the summer thinking about, you can't wait to get to the finish line, you will have missed everything.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
obviously I wasn't going to be doing that while I was doing the interviews, but, and I was just think, okay, well, here's an opportunity. You're going to be talking about the band. You'll be talking a lot about your brother. This is your chance. Everybody that you sit down with to just learn as much as you can about Gord and about what he did,
Mm,
how he did it. And if you aren't fully present for that, you will have missed an opportunity of a lifetime.
yeah.
And that's all it took for me because I guess I knew in my heart that this was going to be, just a once in a lifetime thing. There's no question. Here I am. It's like a whole movie practically.
Mhm.
And that one, it rang true. Like I
Yeah.
really did sit down with everybody. And also, I mean, we weren't headed in that direction, but it also made me aware that to do these interviews was like not to be mercenary about it. In other words, I told you about how, you work with a shooting script. Shooting
Yeah.
script kind of tells you these are the stories that we're going to tell.
Mhm.
Obviously get other material because you never know, but it can really help, sort of, whittle things down quite a bit.
Yeah.
And yet I was really aware in doing these long interviews with everybody, not just the band, that this was an opportunity just to get almost all the stories out and
Mhm.
do it that way. Like do it as an archive, do it for like, these will exist for all time. As it turns out, much of that material is in the follow-up book, that's coming out, tomorrow.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
yeah.
Okay.
So the doc is No Dress Rehearsal, and the book is This Is Our Life.
Oh,
But the
wow.
book is mostly from these interviews that we did in the making of this documentary with
Yeah.
the band and with insiders around the band. But you, really, I really felt it was just this is the time to hear all the stories, and we'll just have them forever.
Yeah.
Like with no real agenda. Um, and that was very satisfying. It's satisfying now to think, about all the different things that I talk to people about. And let's
Mhm.
face it, with the amount of, interviewing that we did, I don't know how much is in the doc. It might be a couple of percent. Like it might be
Yeah.
that small. Usually it's pretty small anyway in a
Sure.
documentary, but this one it's tiny. So
Wow.
that was one. And then I think, when I'm watching the film now, um, I love, I love seeing my family on the screen. I love hearing my mom, my sisters, my brother Patrick talk about Gord. Means a
Mhm.
lot to me. And
Yeah.
um, I love giving Kingston the love in episode 1. I love the way we get into the whole Canadian part of it
Mhm.
and to dig deep, not just to be like, wow, they sang about Canadian places.
Yeah.
No, 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 it was way more.
So much deeper than that.
So much
Yeah.
more than that, so much more
Yeah.
than that, like, a different time,
Mhm.
and there was so much that was important, about what they did and how they did it, and the way that it was received, and the way that it made Canadians feel to this
Yeah.
day.
Mhm.
So that part's very, very satisfying, Tom. I that means a lot to me,
Yeah.
to take that on and not just the part about, yeah, big in Canada, but, in the States, which we also, I believe I don't think we debunk it, but we explain it. It's just
Yeah.
like, yeah,
Yeah.
you're kind of missing the point here. It's not about you do arenas in this country and you only play for 3,000 people in Chicago. It's like, are you kidding me? Like, how do you get 3,000 people in Chicago? And by the way, they weren't all Canadians crossing the border, although Canadians
Right.
love to go see them in the States.
Sure.
So all those kind of things to me are they're very satisfying, to
Yeah.
know that we kind of set out to tell that part of the story. And I think we did it in a good way that's not preachy,
Yeah.
that just kind of makes you think a little bit deeper about some of these themes.
Yeah, yeah. Well, definitely successful on that. And you just taught me, or at least gave me a checkup from the neck up, which is enjoying the journey and not necessarily the destination. I think we do this a lot, right? Which is, yeah, there's some reward in there and it's going to be fun, but man, I can't wait till I'm on the other side of this.
And
And you've just set me straight on other things. I'm not talking about this interview. I'm talking about the fact that, in just life, we can have so much going on that we forget it's that journey. We need to enjoy that journey. And in your case, you were able to reflect and go, I've got this time with these amazing individuals that I'm sure that you call brothers as well, that you're going to archive the history and that's going to live on.
you
And
did.
wow, I mean, that's super powerful. So thank you for that.
Oh,
Cause I need that checkup all the
there
time.
you go.
But now we move on to what was the most challenging. And I'm not talking about we've got to be here, we've got to get all the footage, we've got to do this. It could be maybe it's a relationship that you're like, I knew this person, we had a relationship, it was a little rocky, or maybe it was just assembling everything. I'm not sure, but
Jeez, it's a good question. I mean, I do remember when I was walking into my sister's house, that was, I think, our first real shoot in Kingston was with my sister Charlene.
yeah,
And as we're just setting up, I'm just thinking to myself, I'm going to talk to Charlene about Gord, about losing Gord and what that was
yeah,
like. I'm going to talk to her about losing her son Charles, who Gord wrote about in
yeah.
Fiddler's Green.
Everest Green, yeah,
And it just
beautiful.
occurred to me as we're setting up in our living room in our beautiful house in Kingston, I'm like, why did I start with my sister? Like,
Well, there must have
that
been a pit or a knot there going, oh man, we're gonna peel
yeah.
back some layers here and this might not be comfortable.
Well, it just was like, I just thought to myself, I could have maybe eased into it a little bit for me. I
Yeah,
mean, it was going to be the same for Charlene when we did it. And she was amazing. She's so strong and
yeah, you can tell.
yeah,
Yeah.
she's just incredible. But I was thinking for myself, I'm like, wow, you didn't really think this out very well, did you? And, and it was, and then, I don't know, a few hours, no, I guess the next day, I kind of was like, okay, I'm ready to go. Like
Mhm.
that was, really, it felt, um, it felt right. It
Yeah.
felt right. And, I'm really glad that I, started with Charlotte and then I interviewed Paula the same day,
Mhm.
my, younger sister. And so, and, in a way, Tom, I think, it is a family, it's a family movie,
Yeah.
and, home movie in some ways. And, so, um, yeah, that kind of presents certain challenges. Like there's
Mhm.
always how intimate, you know, should we be?
Yeah.
Certainly around, Gord and his declining health. And that was a challenge. I never really there's no real roadmap for that.
Yeah.
Definitely got some feedback from my brother Patrick and and our team who were phenomenal editor Peter Dennis and story editor Kalen Moon and
Mhm.
Dave Wells, producer, and Brent Hughes, our producer. So that helped a lot. But that was a real obviously, that was a real challenge of,
Yeah.
Gord was a private person, and, we're definitely kind of going past private by a long shot.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
that kind of is something I still, kind of you wrestle with a little bit.
Mhm.
Was it too inside? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really have an answer for that, but
Mm.
I I definitely struggle with it. And I mean, there's um, yeah, I mean, I struggle with like there's not I struggle with everything, my this is a great film. My brother dies in the last episode. It's one of the things that gives it so much tension all the way through. It's not
Yeah.
really a I'm really pleased. I'm really pleased with the film and how good it
Mhm.
is and how people are reacting to it.
Yeah.
But as you can see, it's kind of hard for me to really be like, if this was something else that I just done and I was having
Yeah.
this reaction to be like, wow, have you seen my new film? It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
pretty it's pretty amazing. So even for that, I kind of find it a little. Don't get me wrong, I'm really pleased, and I
Yeah.
understand what this documentary is. I believe what it's going to do in terms of cementing the legacy of my brother
Yeah.
and the band. Um, you know, it's um, it's really complicated. It's really
Yeah.
complicated, and I don't need anybody to, I'm not looking for sympathy. I just, um, it's you know what? It's like so much of this thing. I feel like in many ways, this documentary has sort of two parts to it. I'll try to tie this all together, but the first couple of episodes is all about sort of the exuberance of youth, chasing
Yeah.
your dream, getting in a van with your buddies. I think everybody can relate that to that, and really trying to us against the world. And then the second half, where we get into some of these cumulative tensions and different things within the band, and it's not always great, and they make decisions, and Gord wants to do a solo record, and that hurts people's feelings and all that kind of stuff. And to me, that's the second part of the journey, which is adulthood and
Mhm.
the complexity of adulthood. And so in one side, we can be talking about they didn't get along the same way. It's like, yeah, yeah, they were adults with their own families. They didn't agree.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
that's
People
what life
mature, people
is.
change, of
Pe
course.
people
Yeah.
change, and so when what I was just describing in some ways, about this film, like now I just understand it as this part of the complexity of telling the story as the brother of the lead singer who
Yeah.
tragically dies, and so that's just a complicated sort of formula, and it's not good or bad. He just like
Yeah.
it wasn't, good or bad with the band when they were
Mhm.
all on one page, which they weren't all the time, nearly a day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's not good or bad. It's not like happy, sad. Those are, as an adult, that's life,
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
always that this complicated. And then within that, there is still, great, um, all sorts of things,
Yeah.
achievement, great satisfaction, and
Mhm.
great joy. It's just
Yeah.
never as simple as, as it was when you were younger kind of thing.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's not a bad thing,
Mhm.
that's not a bad theme to take. And I guess I'm kind of applying that as I'm describing my feelings to you about the finished product.
Mhm.
My reaction it's a little complicated. And,
Yeah.
but I have no less pride and I have no less like, you know, love for what we've done. It's
Mhm.
just a little complicated.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's where you hit it right. It's not bad or good, but there's a truth in there,
Yeah.
and that truth needs to be told. And even personally for me, as I'm going through it, you've got episode one, episode two, and the inevitable's coming, and it will be captured in this, and that is sad, right? But at the
It is.
same time, you're you're happy for the band. You're happy to see these relationships that were formed, this brotherhood, this love, and even though inevitably where the story is going to go, which it can be sad. So I understand, but it's the truth that's in the center of all that that I think is so beautiful.
Well, good.
So I want to ask you a couple questions. I know that we're a little bit pressed for time today, which I really appreciate you taking the time to join. But um, Saskadelphia came out of this. Like, how the hell? Like, what the hell, man? That's so.
Saskadelphia,
Incredible. Yeah, like
Saskadelphia, the record that was
the
finally
yeah,
released.
the record. So, I mean, you're going through it, obviously, you find it, and for those that haven't seen it yet or do not know the story, it's Road Apples versus Saskadelphia and how that came about, and I do wanna know what is the receiving of that now that, the US and some of these individuals that didn't know what Road Apples were are like, "What the hell? You
I
you did what?"
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the record execs from back in that time who, turned down Saskadelphia because they hated it. The
That
band's
seems like a
idea.
Gord thing to do. Is that a Gord like, "Saskadelphia, yeah, that's it. I
That
like
was
it.
Johnny.
We like it."
That
Oh,
that
was it
was
Johnny? Oh,
Johnny.
it was Johnny. Right,
Yeah,
right, right. Sorry, yeah.
Johnny's really, Johnny's a funny guy, still is
Yeah.
a very, very funny man, and, that's what he came up with. And, it didn't fly with the US record execs.
Yeah.
But the amazing thing is that, Saskadelphia is now a record,
Yeah.
a six track, so I guess that
6
makes it
track,
a
yeah. Yeah.
EP. Um, but, they were making Road Apples as a double record.
Mm,
They wanted to release a double record, so they, recorded all this extra material that didn't get onto Road Apples when it came out as a single album. So and that was one of the first things that Jake figured out when he came back was going through all these, was a, like a spreadsheet of all the
mm.
different assets that Universal had in their hip, in their archive that was
Yeah.
related to the hip. And he recognized something, on these 2-inch tapes that, and, is that could have been these missing songs.
Right.
And there's a further story. Here you go about the quality, and the twists and turns of the story. We didn't get into it in the doc, but for most of the band, they believed that their masters had been destroyed in the Universal fire from,
Oh,
now I think it's probably 10 years ago, where so many masters of amazing music were destroyed. And because the MC, they ended up with you in Universal. I guess they've
yeah.
been, uh, purchased, by, when they were with MCA. Um, there was an assumption that those masters were down there, and lo and behold, they had been shipped back to Toronto years
Wow.
before the fire. They would have been
Wow.
there at one time. So, and then Jake, kind of doing a little detective work, figures out, well, what are these, 2-inch tapes? And Johnny went into which we filmed.
Yeah.
You see a little bit of it, in the doc, and Johnny went into, Revolution Sound, and they put them, they baked the tapes, because they've been sitting there for so long, and we, whatever it's made out of can get stuck together. So I don't know if it's celluloid or not, but it can get
Okay.
stuck together. So they bake it like in a little easy bake oven kind of thing with a light bulb in it. It's not a real oven, but just to get all the moisture out.
Sure.
And then they found these songs. They found these
Wow.
songs, and that's how Saskadelphia, the hated title, finally made it,
Yeah, well, we're
out.
glad it did.
Yeah. A
That's wild, and
few
that
good
was
tracks.
2020. There's awesome tracks on it. That was 2021, I think it dropped, right?
Was it?
Yeah, I think it was, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna move along here. There was one moment in there in it was the last episode. You were interviewing your mom, and she says, for me, dealing with the passing of Gord was more about he was on tour so often. And that's the way she had liked to at least see things. And then it really sunk in that he had passed, and you could see that. Sorry, even I get emotional now thinking about it, but
Lot of loss.
what was that like at that point for you in dealing with Gord's passing? Obviously, it's a reality. You know what's going on. There was a lead up. You were with them, but was it harder at that point with that interview with your mom?
Yeah, I mean, it was, yeah, it was really it was emotional. Like, it was emotional. My mom's pretty Lorna's pretty she's a strong lady,
You can tell.
you can tell.
Yeah.
And, um And, yeah, I think at that moment, because she would have gone into that interview thinking, I'm, going to be, Amy, and mom's pretty open, but I think she would have wanted to be, kind of not stoic, but
Mm.
certainly, um, yeah, prepared,
Yeah.
prepared,
Yeah.
prepared. Because she's really can talk about just about anything, I'd say. But that was a moment where you're right. You can kind of see it just it sneaks up on her just that moment.
Yeah.
And that was, you know, part of what, we're trying to do was, what I was trying to do, make her comfortable,
Yeah.
make her feel like we're just having a conversation, which we were. Um, and, uh, to be comfortable enough to share that and to ignore the cameras and to ignore everything else and just let yourself go.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a poignant moment in the film, and it really, it's funny. I guess it's sort of, really brings it into perspective, like losing it, no matter what age, losing a child, it's just not the way it's supposed to be. And
Yeah.
I think there's part of that that you just never can fully accept.
Yeah.
And that's why she would say, I'll just pretend like he's on tour.
Yeah.
Uh, hard to reach and, out there doing his thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a very, it was an unguarded moment for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one that really packs a wallet for sure.
Yeah, I'll say.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, at least, through the documentary and now the book coming out, you have that immortalization. It's there, so she can still see him. He's out
Yeah.
doing
No,
this, right?
dude, it's
So that's
true.
beautiful. And so, listen, we're gonna wrap up. It's not lost on me to that today, even though the episode will drop a little bit later in the week. Today is the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation, September 30th. Yourself and Gord started a fund, which is the Gord Downie, and I don't want to mess up the name, but it's Chanie Wenjack.
Yeah,
Is that
that's
how
right.
you say that? Okay, so that's so tell us a little bit about that, and then let's promote. You've got the gala tomorrow in Kingston, the book, but please let's focus on the fund first
Yeah,
because
no,
it
and
may.
I would have worn my orange shirt, but I kind of
Yeah,
assumed that we'll be, airing after that. Today is his Truth and Reconciliation Day. And, I think that, um, when Gord, created Secret Path,
yeah,
that told the story of Chanie Wenjack, just something that he, you know, and that started in 2012, when
yeah,
we first heard the story on a radio documentary, on CBC by Jodie Porter. It really kind of took hold of Gord, this powerful story of this one boy,
mm,
who dies running away from his residential school. And I think the power of it is it by just telling the story of one, if you care about one, then it opens the door to caring about all the children that
yes,
were taken away from what they knew
mm,
and put into this environment, this terrible environment, and ask them to just renounce everything that they'd been led, everything that they believed
everything.
in.
Yeah,
Um, and so, just so, uh, you're right. Gord and I, and the our brother Patrick and the Wenjack family decided to kind of come together to create just a place where Indigenous and non-Indigenous people could come together. It's really meant to be an on ramp. I feel like for
mm,
reconciliation, like a place where this is, if if you have any curiosity at all, then if you come here, we can help you find your path, like
yeah,
move down that way. And I think that's what reconciliation really is about, is
hmm,
we kind of need everybody walking this path, as a individual, as a family, as a collective, whether that's at work or, an organization that you're a part of, it could be minor hockey, whatever it
hmm,
is. Like there is something you can do to
yeah,
further reconciliation, to create a country where Indigenous people, can one day feel proud to be a part of.
yes,
So, and it's, reconciliation is complicated. There's a lot there, but, before, and Gord, went through it. You go from
yeah,
these stages of awareness, and then the next is education, which is so important, and then action. And we're kind of there at the Downie Wenjack Fund to help you go through those stages, because it's really easy to get, really motivated by something and then want to come in with the fix. It's kind of like
Mhm.
our Western way of kind of
Yeah,
thinking like, oh
that's
my
so
God, this
true.
is
Yeah,
terrible and we got to do something. It's like, well, hold on now. Like, understand what has taken place, understand the efforts that are in place, understand the NCTR report and the 94 calls to action, like educate yourself.
yeah,
Don't lose any of that intensity. You'll probably develop more, actually more, but then move into the action. We kind of want to be there to help shepherd that along, not to interfere with that, but to inspire it and to maybe some ways just help people sort of manage it a little bit so that you are coming on board for the long haul.
yeah.
You're not reacting to what feels like, this is the issue of the day. It goes
Mhm.
much deeper than that because it really is about our country. We had an opportunity a long time ago for Indigenous to be a part of this country, and we that was not um, that opportunity was stepped right over when we had our Confederation and before
Yeah,
that. So, is this a second chance? Perhaps. I hope
mm,
so. I
yeah,
think that there is so much that we can learn as Canadians about the worldview that so many Indigenous hold, the way of being in the world that so many Indigenous hold. And I think in many
yeah,
ways, these ideas and this sort of it, they're more relevant than ever. Our
yeah,
sped up world, the themes of family and gratitude, and taking care of our natural environment. These are and each other.
yeah.
These are powerful themes, but they've been practiced on this land for thousands of years, just
Right,
to think
right.
and we can all be a part of that in some way, not in the same
Mhm.
way as Indigenous people, but we can be a part of that, of recognizing we're part of something that goes back thousands of years. Just when we walk out onto the street,
Yeah,
because that's the same. This is the land. This is the
it's the same
physical
that's it.
space.
Yes,
So
yeah,
that is an opportunity, and I think that's a good way to look at it, as opposed to we need to make amends. We need to make reparations, all sorts of things, and they're complicated,
yeah,
extremely. But at the same time, we're doing this. There's also something that is waiting for people that are willing to sort of, you know, take part in reconciliation. There's, I think, a greater, yeah, there's something waiting there as well that I think will really help all of us connect with it with a
yeah,
greater, a more powerful collective in many
yeah.
ways because we left out perhaps the most important part of our collective in the beginning. We completely
Right,
left. Gord always felt that. As a kid,
yeah,
even, he said he always thought there was this Canada thing. He just instinctively felt there was something missing. And
yeah.
he was intuiting this incredible, terrible history that he didn't really
Wow.
know much about as a kid or anything,
Yeah,
and then discovered it later in life.
yeah,
And then spent the last couple of years of his life trying to instill that curiosity or just that responsibility
mhm.
into non-Indigenous Canadians, because that's really what the
Yeah,
Downie Wenjack Fund is meant to reach. We're
yeah,
Indigenous people know these stories. We want to bring non-Indigenous people into the conversation
yeah,
and
that makes
a
sense.
day to listen is a great opportunity for just that today on private radio stations all over the country. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah. So
beautiful.
really, we're really trying, Tom, and we don't take it lightly at all.
I
It's
love the
tough stuff.
approach though,
It's
Mike,
tough
like,
stuff.
because you hit the nail on the head, right? Which is we come in at guns ablaze and we need to help, we need to change, we get invigorated about something, and then we it'll fizzle off or we forget about it or it's not just a matter of this is the hottest thing, this is the problem to solve for us. This is a matter of you've created this in order for people to understand and have that understanding as they move in, and then that's where change can happen, that's where reconciliation can happen. So I love it, big supporter. But let's okay, big gala tomorrow night, Kingston, which for those that catch the episode this will already have been dropped and happened, but continued success on that. We know that No Dress Rehearsal is going to continue to just pop. But tell us about the book, remind us about the book, and where can we get it?
You can get it on the HIP site. You can get it online anywhere. You can order it. It comes out tomorrow, but it's
Hmm.
called "This Is Our Life," and it's kind of the oral history of the band, as told by members of the band and people in their inner circle.
So
And
cool.
yeah, it's and with all sort it's kind of a coffee table book, but it reads well. But it
Mhm.
has all sorts of the ephemera photographed beautifully, the earliest ticket stubs, movie, show posters,
Wow.
all that kind of, those elements are in there, and they're all from the band's archives, their personal
Yeah.
archives and the band archive as well. So it's quite a collection of ephemera and of stories,
Yeah.
that couldn't make it into the doc. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I hope people get a
You needed
chance
a
to
20
look
hour.
at. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly,
no,
20
well,
hours.
20 hours. I would've watched it for
Yeah, you
sure.
go. This is
Uh,
season 1, season
there you
1.
go. Yeah, looking forward to season 2, and then we got the book. Okay.
Right
Mike,
on.
thank you so much for joining Legacies. We know you've got a lot on the go. Much continued success. We appreciate you joining us.
Thanks so much, Tom. Really appreciate it.